The snow fell in heavy sheets over the ruins of Epsilon Prime, muffling the screams that had long since faded into the cold. Smoke still rose from the shattered colony walls, where the Zelvar Empire's forces had executed every man, woman, and child who dared resist. The bodies of human civilians lay frozen in the streets, crimson staining the white snow, a brutal message to the rest of humanity. Hidden in the shadows of the skeletal remains of a bombed-out building, Captain Jane Ramirez watched in silence as two small bodies lay lifeless in the snow. Her children, her world, her reason for breathing. Her breath trembled against the cold, but her hands, steady as stone, gripped the ancient M82 sniper rifle she'd smuggled onto this cursed planet months before the invasion. The Zelvar, in all their technological arrogance, never considered projectile-based weapons a threat. They relied on energy shielding and plasma barriers, impervious to light and heat, but helpless against kinetic force. The aliens never understood humanity's capacity for adaptation. Neither had Jane. Not until now. A lone Zelvar officer stood over the bodies of her son and daughter, the towering, insectoid creature clicking and hissing in its native tongue as it ordered its soldiers to burn the remains. Jane's vision narrowed. Her breath slowed. The weight of her grief sharpened her focus to something colder than the ice beneath her knees. Through her scope, she found the alien's elongated skull and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder as the .50 caliber round punched through the creature's armor and shattered its head in an instant. The Zelvar soldier beside it barely registered the death before another round tore through his chest. Jane adjusted her aim, picking off the third alien before the others even turned to locate her position. Contact. North Ridge, one of the Zelvar barked in broken English as they scrambled for cover. Jane vanished into the snow, dragging her rifle behind her as she moved with practiced ease through the debris and ice. She'd been U.S. Marine Recon before the war, operating deep behind enemy lines in the Middle East. But that was Earth. That was before humanity reached for the stars and found monsters waiting in the dark. She slipped through the shadows and descended into the lower levels of the ruined colony, her mind burning with cold, controlled fury. The Zelvar thought they'd broken humanity here, crushed the will of the last American resistance. They hadn't met her squad. In the darkened tunnels beneath the city, she found them waiting. Sergeant Jack Iron Carter leaned against the rusted bulkhead, the scars on his face reflecting the dim light from the distant fires. Beside him, Specialist Mike Gears Hawkins, the team's combat engineer, worked silently on rigging old industrial plasma cells into makeshift explosives. And in the corner, Lieutenant David Ghost Reynolds sat sharpening a combat knife, his eyes reflecting the same quiet rage Jane felt burning in her chest. "You get eyes on the target?" Carter asked without looking up. Jane dropped to one knee, setting her rifle against the wall. The officer's dead. Squad's in chaos. But they killed them. They killed my kids. The silence that followed was heavier than the snow falling above. No words were needed. These men had fought beside Jane for years. They'd bled together on a dozen worlds, watched brothers fall to alien fire, and lost families when Earth's outer colonies burned. But this was different. Ghost spoke first, his voice low and cold. "They don't get to leave this planet alive." Jane nodded. "We make them pay. Every last one of them." Gears tightened the last charge and stood. "Then let's make this colony a graveyard." The squad moved through the tunnels with practiced silence, navigating the broken infrastructure of Epsilon Prime. The Zelvar relied on advanced sensors and aerial surveillance drones to track human movement, but the old American soldiers knew these streets. They'd fought in the ruins of Baghdad, Fallujah, and Chicago during the First Contact War. War was in their blood. When they emerged from the underground, Jane spotted a Zelvar patrol sweeping the perimeter. The aliens moved with confidence, their towering exoskeletal forms glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns beneath their armor. Arrogant, untouchable. Jane adjusted her rifle and signaled to Carter, who flanked left, disappearing into the rubble. Gears followed, planting EMP charges along the path to disrupt the Zeldar's communication grid. Ghost stayed beside Jane, his suppressed marksman rifle ready. "On my mark," Jane whispered. The wind howled through the ruins as Jane's scope settled on the lead alien's head. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the night, and the Zeldar soldier's head snapped back, lifeless before it hit the ground. Carter struck from the shadows, knife flashing as he slit the throat of the second alien before it could react. Ghost dropped the third with a single, silent round to the head. By the time the rest of the patrol turned, Gears detonated the EMP, plunging the area into darkness. The humans moved like ghosts in the storm, cutting down the alien soldiers one by one. Within minutes, the patrol lay dead in the snow, their black blood seeping into the ice. Carter knelt beside one of the corpses, tearing off the alien's communication device. "They're gonna know we're coming." Jane chambered another round. "Let them." The squad pressed forward, slipping deeper into enemy territory. Every step brought them closer to the Zeldar command center, where the alien general responsible for the massacre directed the slaughter of her children and countless others. The Empire came here to break humanity. But tonight, they'd learned that Earth's deadliest weapon had never been its technology or its numbers. It was the fury of an American mother with a rifle, and 4 brothers who would burn the galaxy to the ground beside her. The cold of Epsilon Prime seeped through the cracks in Jane's armor, but she welcomed it. Pain kept her sharp. Rage kept her alive. The sniper rifle rested against her shoulder as she and her squad ghosted through the wreckage of the colony, bodies of fallen civilians frozen in the snow around them. The Zeldar had come here expecting compliance, believing their superior technology would crush human resistance. What they failed to understand, what every alien species that dared wage war against humanity failed to grasp, was that Americans don't surrender. Jane's squad moved in perfect silence, hardened by wars fought on distant worlds and by battles that stretched back to Earth itself. Carter, the heavy gunner, advanced ahead with practiced ease, his M240 slung across his chest. Gears, the combat engineer, carried the tools of a saboteur, plasma charges cobbled from alien tech and old Earth explosives. Ghost, the quietest of them all, moved through the darkness like a shadow, his suppressed rifle ready to strike from a distance. Jane led them through the skeletal remains of the colony's industrial sector, her sniper scope sweeping the horizon. The Zeldar had locked down the northern sector, establishing fortified command posts and drone patrols to hunt for survivors. But they didn't understand the terrain. Humans had built these streets. Humans had bled for this soil. And now, humans would turn it into a graveyard. As they moved, Jane's mind drifted to her children, her daughter's laughter, her son's smile. She'd taught them how to shoot in the forests of Montana before the war, before the stars called humanity to new frontiers. The Zeldar took that from her. They took everything. And now, she would take everything from them. 2 targets on the ridge. Ghost's voice crackled softly through her earpiece. Thermal readings. Zeldar scouts. Jane raised her rifle, finding the shimmering heat signatures through her scope. The aliens stood tall and insectoid, their exoskeletal armor humming with faint bioluminescence. Arrogant, exposed, Jane's finger tightened on the trigger. The first round punched through the alien's head, splattering dark blood across the snow. The second turned, antennae twitching in panic, but Ghost's silenced shot dropped it before it could sound the alarm. Clear, Ghost confirmed. Carter moved forward, signaling the squad to advance. They slipped through the rubble, avoiding alien patrols as Gears planted EMP mines along the path. The Zeldar relied on drones and sensor grids to maintain control, but human ingenuity thrived in chaos. Gears' devices would blind them long enough for Jane's team to strike the heart of the alien command structure. The squad reached the edge of the old refinery district, where the Zeldar had established a forward command post. Towering plasma turrets and automated sentries lined the perimeter, while Zeldar officers barked orders to lesser soldiers in their guttural, clicking language. At the center stood the alien commander, the one who ordered the massacre of the colony's civilians. Jane's pulse slowed as she adjusted her scope. The distance was over 2 miles, a shot that only a handful of snipers in human history could make. But she wasn't just any sniper. She was Shadow, the legend the Zeldar feared but couldn't see. "I've got the target," Jane whispered. "Copy that," Carter replied. "Gears, light M up." Gears activated the EMP charges, and in an instant the alien perimeter defenses flickered and died. Automated turrets fell silent. Surveillance drones crashed to the ground. The Zeldar soldiers hesitated, momentarily blind and deaf to the battlefield. Jane fired. The round traveled across the frozen landscape, cutting through the wind and snow before punching clean through the alien commander's skull. The creature collapsed, its lifeless body sending shock waves of panic through the remaining forces. Carter's machine gun roared to life, cutting down the scrambling soldiers. Gears detonated plasma charges along the fuel lines, sending waves of fire and debris through the enemy ranks. Ghost moved with deadly precision, picking off officers and heavy gunners before they could regroup. Jane didn't stop. She dropped the next officer, then another, each shot calculated and ruthless. She could see it in the aliens' movements, the fear, the confusion. They didn't understand how a handful of humans were ripping through their ranks. But this wasn't just warfare. This was vengeance. The squad pushed forward, slipping through the smoke and fire as the Zeldar forces collapsed. Jane took position on a higher vantage point, her rifle finding alien snipers attempting to flank her men. She ended them before they could pull the trigger. Gears breached the command post, planting high-yield explosives along the Zeldar's communication relays. Carter provided cover fire, while Ghost eliminated the remaining sentries with cold efficiency. "Charges set," Gears reported. "Do it," Jane ordered. The blast lit up the night sky, shattering the command post and severing the Zeldar's control over their forces. Panic spread through the alien ranks as their chain of command crumbled. Jane watched through her scope as the survivors fled, scattering into the wilderness. Cowards. Invaders. They came to conquer humanity. But tonight, they'd learned that no alien empire, no advanced technology, and no fleet in the stars could match the fury of an American soldier with nothing left to lose. As the fires burned and the snow continued to fall, Jane felt the weight of her children's absence pressing against her chest. She would never hear their laughter again, never hold them in her arms. But she would make sure the Zeldar knew fear for generations to come. One shot at a time. The night sky burned with the dying embers of the Zeldar command post, the snow reflecting an eerie orange glow as the alien bodies lay scattered across the frozen ground. Jane Ramirez scanned the battlefield through her scope, her breath slow and controlled despite the storm raging within her. The Zeldar were broken, disorganized, their chain of command severed, and their forward base reduced to ash. But Jane knew better than to believe this was victory. Not yet. The true predator does not retreat. It regroups. It adapts. And it strikes back harder. "We've rattled the hive," Carter said, stepping over the smoldering remains of a Zeldar heavy gunner. "They'll be coming." "Let them," Jane replied coldly as she slung her sniper rifle across her back. Ghost emerged from the shadows, wiping alien blood from his knife. Scouts already moving through the south sector. They're pulling back civilians to use as shields. Jane's stomach tightened. The Zeldar had no concept of mercy. To them, humans were insects, primitive, fragile creatures unworthy of respect. That's why they slaughtered her children. That's why they burned Epsilon Prime. And now, with their forces crumbling, they would do what cowards always did, hide behind the innocent. Gears knelt by a fallen Zeldar soldier, prying a plasma cell from its armor. If they want to drag civilians into this, fine. We'll rip their defenses apart before they even know we're coming. "No," Jane said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We're not here for body count. We're here to break them." Carter raised an eyebrow. "What's the play, Captain?" Jane looked toward the distant refinery complex where the Zeldar had herded the remaining human civilians. Beneath it ran the old colony's geothermal tunnels, a forgotten labyrinth that only humans knew. She'd helped build them when Epsilon Prime was still a dream of American pioneers looking to claim a future among the stars. "We hit them from below," Jane said. infiltrate through the tunnels, plant charges along their energy conduits, and collapse the entire structure while they're inside. We cut off their reinforcements and free the civilians before they realize what's happening." Carter grinned. "Good OL, American guerrilla warfare. I'm in." Ghost simply nodded, already fading into the darkness. The squad moved swiftly through the ruins, navigating through the frozen streets and slipping past Zeldar patrols. Jane led them to the entrance of the old geothermal grid, a rusted hatch buried beneath layers of ice and snow. Gears pried it open, and the squad descended into the earth, swallowed by darkness and the faint hum of ancient machinery. The tunnels were a relic of human ingenuity, designed to harness the planet's volcanic core to power the colony. The Zeldar never bothered with such primitive infrastructure, believing their advanced fusion reactors made human technology obsolete. That arrogance would cost them. As they advanced through the dimly lit corridors, Jane's thoughts drifted to her children. She could still hear her daughter's voice echoing in her memory, asking when she would return from her last deployment. She could still feel her son's small hand gripping hers before she left to fight this war. The Zeldar stole those moments from her. And now, she would steal everything from them. Gears moved ahead, planting plasma charges along the primary energy lines that fed the refinery's defense grid. Ghost cleared the corners with practiced precision, his knife flashing in the dark as he silently dispatched the occasional Zeldar scout who wandered too close. Carter brought up the rear, carrying the squad's heavy ordnance, enough explosives to collapse half the refinery when the time came. As they neared the central power core, Jane raised a fist, signaling the squad to halt. Through the dim light, she spotted them, 2 Zeldar guards stationed at the maintenance access point. Ghost raised his suppressed rifle, but Jane shook her head. "They'll hear the shot," she whispered. Carter grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Let me handle this." Before anyone could stop him, Carter surged forward like an unstoppable force. The first alien barely had time to turn before Carter's combat knife plunged into its throat. The second raised its plasma rifle, but Carter caught its arm, twisting and snapping the alien's limb with brutal efficiency before driving his blade through its skull. The bodies crumpled to the ground without a sound. "Subtle," Ghost muttered. Carter wiped the blood from his knife. "You're welcome." Gears finished planting the final charge along the power core. "We're set. One spark and this whole place turns into molten slag." Jane activated her comms, linking to the scattered resistance fighters who had survived the Zeldar massacre. "Bravo team, this is Shadow. Detonations are set. On my mark, move in and secure the civilians." A grizzled voice crackled back. "Copy that, Captain. We've been waiting for this." Jane's squad retreated to the far side of the tunnels as Gears primed the detonator. "You sure about this, Captain?" Carter asked. Jane's eyes burned with quiet fury. "I'm sure." "Then light him up." Gears pressed the trigger. The charges erupted in a chain reaction, ripping through the refinery's infrastructure and severing the Zeldar's energy grid. The ground trembled as molten plasma vents exploded from beneath, engulfing the alien forces trapped inside the facility. Screams echoed through the tunnels as the Zeldar soldiers were incinerated in the chaos. Above ground, human resistance fighters stormed the perimeter, gunning down the disoriented aliens as they scrambled to escape the inferno. Jane's squad emerged from the tunnels just in time to see the refinery collapse in on itself, sending pillars of fire and smoke into the sky. The few surviving Zeldar fled into the wilderness, broken and leaderless. The civilians, weak and starving from weeks of captivity, stumbled from the wreckage and into the arms of the American fighters who had come to save them. An older man, covered in ash and blood, approached Jane, eyes filled with disbelief. You did this?" he asked. Jane's expression was hard. "They killed my children," she said. "I killed their empire." Carter stepped beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "And this is just the beginning." Jane watched the distant horizon, where the stars burned bright over the frozen world. The Zeldar thought they could exterminate humanity. They didn't realize they'd only awakened the one thing the galaxy feared most: a human mother with nothing left to lose. The fires of the refinery still burned behind them as Jane and her squad moved through the snow-covered wasteland. The Zeldar forces had been shattered, their command structure obliterated, and their forward base reduced to ash. Yet Jane's grip on her rifle remained tight, her eyes scanning the distant ridges where the alien war machines once patrolled. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The surviving civilians, weak and battered from weeks of captivity, huddled together as the remnants of the American resistance worked to evacuate them. Old men, broken mothers, and frightened children, each one a living reminder of what the Zeldar had stolen from humanity. Jane stood at the edge of the frozen battlefield, her breath visible in the frigid air. Carter stepped up beside her, the heavy gunner's usual grin replaced with quiet respect. "They're scared," Carter said, nodding toward the civilians. "Don't blame them. They've seen what those monsters did to their families." Jane's jaw tightened. "So have we." Ghost emerged from the shadows, his rifle slung across his back. "Scouts report Zeldar survivors regrouping in the northern valley. Could be calling for reinforcements." "Good," Jane said without hesitation. "Let them come." Gears let out a bitter chuckle as he adjusted the makeshift plasma detonator strapped to his chest. "They keep thinking we're fighting for survival. They still don't get it. We're here to make sure they never set foot on human soil again." Carter's eyes narrowed toward the horizon. If they're pulling back to regroup, that means they still have a command ship in orbit. Jane nodded. "The fleet. That's the heart of their empire. We take that out. We don't just end the occupation here. We send a message to every alien species watching from the shadows." Ghost raised a brow. "You're talking about boarding a Zeldar dreadnought. With what, Captain?" "Harsh language." Jane allowed herself a faint smirk. "With American ingenuity. We've been fighting wars since before these bugs crawled out of whatever pit they came from. And we've never lost." Carter grinned. "Hell yeah." The plan came together with brutal efficiency. While the remaining resistance fighters escorted the civilians to the extraction point, Jane's squad moved toward the northern valley, where the Zeldar survivors were transmitting a distress signal to their fleet. Ghost scouted ahead, eliminating patrols and tagging the enemy's position. Gears rigged the terrain with plasma mines, forcing the Zeldar to consolidate their forces near the old colony's abandoned communication tower. From a high ground, Jane's squad watched as the alien dropship descended through the thick clouds, its sleek, obsidian hull gleaming against the snow. The vessel was designed for rapid extraction, not combat, and that made it vulnerable. As the Zeldar began loading their wounded and officers onto the ship, Jane signaled to Gears. "Do it." The mines erupted in a chain reaction, sending fire and debris ripping through the alien ranks. Panic spread as the Zeldar scrambled for cover, their attention diverted from the true threat moving in from the ridge. Jane's first shot took out the ship's pilot as he attempted to board. Ghost's suppressed rifle eliminated the sentries guarding the loading ramp. Carter's machine gun thundered as he laid down suppressive fire, pinning the remaining soldiers against the hull. Gears sprinted through the chaos, planting plasma charges along the vessel's fuel lines before diving for cover. The detonation ripped through the lower decks, crippling the ship's engines and grounding it permanently. "Clear," Ghost reported. "Move in," Jane ordered. The squad advanced through the smoke, executing any surviving Zeldar who resisted and securing the vessel's comm relay. Gears hacked into the alien communication grid, transmitting a false distress signal to the Zeldar fleet above. "Signal's out," Gears confirmed. "They'll think this dropship is ready for extraction." Jane's eyes burned with quiet resolve. "Good. Let's give them a warm welcome." The squad concealed themselves within the wreckage as the Zeldar fleet responded to the signal. Within minutes, a massive dreadnought descended from the heavens, its hull casting an ominous shadow over the battlefield. The docking clamps extended, latching onto the crippled dropship and pulling it into the heart of the alien warship. As the blast doors sealed behind them, Jane activated her comms. "All units, we're inside." Carter grinned. "Time to burn this whole empire to the ground." The squad moved through the interior of the dreadnought with ruthless precision, eliminating patrols and sabotaging critical systems as they advanced toward the ship's core. Gears planted explosives along the plasma conduits, while Ghost took out key officers and communication nodes, cutting off the Zeldar's ability to coordinate. By the time the aliens realized the threat was already inside, it was too late. Jane reached the command bridge, stepping over the bodies of fallen Zeldar officers as alarms blared throughout the ship. The alien captain, a towering creature with jagged chitin and glowing eyes, turned to face her, hissing in rage. "You are nothing," the creature snarled in broken English. Jane raised her rifle, cold and unflinching. "I'm human." The round punched through the captain's skull, sending the creature crashing to the deck. "Gears lighted up," Jane ordered. The explosives detonated in sequence, ripping through the dreadnought's power core and sending shockwaves through the ship's structure. The squad sprinted toward the evacuation pods, barely escaping as the vessel erupted in flames and debris. From a frozen surface of Epsilon Prime, Jane and her men watched as the dreadnought fell from the sky, crashing into the distant mountains with a deafening roar. Carter let out a low whistle. "You think the rest of their fleet got the message?" Jane's eyes remained fixed on the burning wreckage. "They'll get the message," she said. "And if they don't, we'll keep sending it. One shot at a time." The squad stood in silence as the flames consumed the remains of the alien vessel, knowing that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had feared humanity's potential. Now it would fear humanity's wrath.